I also have the pleasure of introducing our speaker. See if my 40-something eyes can read this small font. I'll give them a brief introduction now, and then we'll turn it over to them. I think Jim is going to go first. So the first is Bill Gattle. Bill Gattle is Vice President of Aerospace Systems Business for Harris Corporation. He has primary responsibility for the business strategy, financial performance, and successful execution of all programs within the aerospace systems. I heard him say earlier that he deals with money. How does Harris make business? Because Harris Corporation is a for-profit company. But that business decision is not just driven by dollars and cents. It's driven by engineering skills in combination with an understanding of how a business functions. And I think you're going to hear some of that from him this evening. Prior to being his current position, he was the vice president of the Space Communication Systems when that unit grew revenue by 30% under his tenure per year. That's amazing growth. You don't get 30% growth sustained in many areas, other than our enrollment increase, I think, per year, which is on the order of 30%. Mr. Gattle has also maintained membership in his professional societies, members of AIAA, AFME both, and that continued involvement in your professional societies after you graduate is important. I'm proud to say that he is a Bachelor and Master of Science degree holder from our department in mechanical engineering. Last year I had the pleasure to be the department chair that awarded him as the department chair, but it was from our department as an Outstanding Alumnus Award last year. So that's our highest honor that we give to our graduates in the department. So with that, we're very proud to count him among our alumni and to see, I think he's going to share some of his success with you. Our second speaker is Jim Clamons, and he is the Vice President of Engineering Operations for Harris Corporation. Now, let me put that in perspective. He has responsibility for the talent management of over 2,400 engineers. That's a lot. And that talent management involves their professional growth. So he's not only a technical manager of that engineering umbrella, but he's also looking at their growth, their professional development as young engineers into senior engineers. And that's a lot of responsibility, and he's going to try to share some of that with you. I wish I could say he was a graduate of the University of Florida, but he is a graduate of Purdue University, which, as you all know, is a wonderful engineering school. One of the oldest in the country, the Boilermakers. But I will throw a bone. Your son came to University of Florida and is a Gator grad, so he has Gator ties as well. So we're gonna make him an honorary Gator for tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to our speakers, and I'd like you to join me in giving them a wonderful.
So I am a graduate of the Harris University of Florida graduate program in MBA. Back in the early 80s, we had a program in conjunction with the University of Florida where we did a mini MBA, and I got that in conjunction with Florida. So I do have Florida blood in me. So good introductory comments because they lead very well into what we want to talk about tonight. And let me start with thank you for inviting us up. And a couple of you have heard a lot of what I'm going to say tonight, so I'm sorry you'll hear it again. For those who haven't heard it, hopefully it's interesting to you. Everything Bill's going to say you won't have heard before, so. But he told me to leave him 5 minutes at the end. So. And I am also an outstanding. I got the Outstanding Alumni Award from Purdue. And we were talking, Bill manages the money. We were actually talking about this on the way up here, that the engineering function doesn't really deal with bottom line profit, but it's how we operate and how we, what we roll up in the cost and how we execute and the value we bring to the program that allows him at the product line level to claim profit. So while he can't, without us, he can't generate the margins he needs to claim the profit, but we don't actually get to do that. So I'm gonna start off, and if you can't hear me, raise your hand because I know I tend to fade off. I'm gonna start off with a pitch that I hadn't planned to do until this morning, and it's not what you asked me to do, so nobody has seen this part yet. And you talked about in the introduction the value of a leader is passion. And so I want to tell you one of my passions is community service. And I believe that you show that passion partly by leading by example. And watch the way I'm going and go that way. So it's very big at Harris we are very big on returning to the community. We do a lot of volunteer projects. But I wanted to start with, let me tell you what a good Saturday feels like. So, yeah, very nice name for this photo album. A nice Saturday starts about 2 o'clock in the morning. And let me start out with a little preface. So World War II, how many people from the U.S. participated in, enlisted and fought in World War II? Anybody have a guess? Somebody say 15 million, I'll say you're right. That's the kind of conversation we'll have, okay. That sets the stage. There's about 1 million left alive today. So 15 million people were in World War II, about 1 million left today. They are dying at a rate of about 800 a day. The youngest World War II vet today they'll be this year 84 or 85. The oldest, I'm not sure how old the oldest is, but so there is an organization called Honor Flight that takes World War II veterans and flies them up to DC for a day to go visit the war memorial that was built for them, the World War II War Memorial. While they're there, they could do some other things. So, 2 o'clock in the morning, about 100 uniformed military and a bunch of volunteers are setting up a senior center, waiting for 25 veterans of World War II to show up and their 25 guardians who are getting ready the 50 of them plus a few staff, getting ready to go up to DC for a day. It's a military event, so you start out with revelry and the honor guard. You have the mayors, this again, 2 o'clock in the morning, Saturday morning. The mayors, every mayor from Brevard County, all the cities, were there to welcome this group. Bill Posey, our congressman, was there to talk to the group. And I didn't think he would make it through without crying. He had a story about his father. One of the things you have to know about World War II vets, when the war broke out, we decided we were going to participate. Everybody just dropped what they were doing and enlisted and went and fought. Those that made it back came back. There was not a lot of fanfare for them when they got back. They went back to rebuilding their families, rebuilding the country, and starting life. Not a lot of thank yous and celebrations. And that's kind of what Bill Posey was talking about. Brigadier General Cotton, who runs Patrick Air Force Base, was there and talked to the veterans. We stayed there for about an hour, got on our bus, had a police escort from Wickham Park in Brevard County over to Orlando Airport. At 3 in the morning, you don't need a whole lot of police escort to get through Brevard County. We have one anyway. The military was outside, gave the salute to the veterans as we left. When we got to the airport, the TSA and their honor guard, I had no idea TSA had an honor guard. They were waiting for us as the bus drove up, and we got off the bus. The honor guard and there were other people, and actually they weren't waiting for us. They were waiting for the veterans. The guardians are there just to make sure the veterans come home in the same shape that they went in, and that they don't fall anywhere. So my job was just to make sure my veteran one had a good time and came back safely. But we got there, and honor guard waiting for us. They took us through a special TSA, so I had to do a show my license. We bypassed going through the X-ray machines, and actually I was taking my veteran through probably at the end of the group, and somebody yelled, "Hey, there's a World War II vet," and 1,000 people that were waiting to get in through security all just started cheering. It's hard to not get emotional about that, as I am now. As we got on the plane, that honor guard was to help us get on the plane. As we left Orlando, they had the fire engines out and they're shooting water over, so we had the goodbye there. They had the airplane. The fire department was ready for us in Baltimore where we landed, but it was 30 degrees, so they weren't allowed to shoot the water. So they were flanking us, and at least by then it was light and you could see them. When we got off the plane, there were probably 100 uniformed military lining the gate getting out, and all greeting the veterans, and probably another 300-400 civilians just there to greet everybody in Washington. And this was, my wife went with me. We were lucky enough that we escorted a husband and wife veteran pair. So Ev Van Staten and George Van Staten. George, my veteran, is 95 years old. They've been married for 66 years. And Mary got to escort Ev, and I got to escort George. Ev was a rock star. Being one of the first females in the military, all of the females in the military today were just all over her. Thank you for what you did to allow us to be in the military and do what we do today. It was amazing. We had a motorcycle escort of volunteers from Baltimore Airport downtown, about 20 motorcycles, lights flashing, helping us get down quick. First went to the Air Force Memorial. I've seen this for years, and I thought it had to do with the 9/11. I thought it was a 9/11 memorial. It's the Air Force Memorial. It's right behind the Pentagon. An amazing day. This is the veteran that I got to escort for the day. We went from there to the World War II Memorial. We took a doctor with us. This is Dr. Diaz from Patrick Air Force Base. There in case there's an issue. And a couple of our veterans. This is the whole group of veterans at the World War II Museum and their escorts. So again, this is my veteran. And at the end of the day, I asked him, what was the highlight of your day? Well, he's a George Washington graduate, and on the group over here is the George Washington volleyball team, and a couple girls from the lacrosse team, and this picture was his highlight of the day. Beautiful women. It was funny to watch. These girls would be standing around, and somebody would lift the camera, and then boom, into pose. And it was pretty funny. And most of the veterans we took fought against Japan, and so we're in the Pacific part of the World War II war, so we have a picture of that side. Again, that's my veteran. This is the Vietnam Memorial. We went over to the Korean Memorial. They're all in the same area at the park. This wall, if you haven't been there, it's an amazing wall. It's a granite wall, and they've etched into it these pictures. I can't see them real well, but some of these faces, like this one, are etching into the stone, and then some of these are reflections of the statues that they have behind the wall in the wood. So it's an amazing artwork. Ev, I mentioned, was a nurse in World War II. She's a charter member of the Women's Memorial, so we went to the Women's Memorial and they gave her a special plaque over there, so it was pretty special. Then we went over to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, watched the changing of the guard. If you haven't seen that, it's incredible. And at the end of that, while we were there, Ev was in the military, and at the end of his career, he was a director at NASA on the manned spaceflight. So this memorial to the Columbia accident was very important to him, so I made sure I took him over to that part of the cemetery. These are two of the guards that do the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, came on the bus with us for about 15 minutes and just answered questions about what it's like to be a guard, what it takes to be, how do you get in, how long do you stay. Went over to Iwo Jima Memorial, and again, these were the two Marines that were in the group, so we had a picture by the Marine Corps. Over by the Capitol, there's a Navy memorial over by the Capitol that we stopped at, and then back to the Baltimore Airport. As part of World War II, part of the experience of being in the military was mail call. So it was a big deal where you got the letters from home and they call them out and they get back the letters. So they do a mail call as part of this day, and they have the veteran, unbeknownst to the veterans, they have their friends and family write thank you letters, and they get them out at the airports. It's the groups reading that. Back on the plane, back to Orlando, on the bus, back over to the senior center. We got there, and there's an honor guard, the Saber Guard, waiting for us to get back. And off the plane, it's a welcome home. The welcome home you didn't necessarily get when you were coming home from the war, and then just the honor guard there. So that's my definition of a good Saturday. So thank you for letting me go through that. And I'll get to thing to talk about. So leadership. Again, this is the talk that I do in the for the leadership class, the graduate leadership class, and a lot of what I do in that class is I've been at Harris for 36 years, almost 36 years now. It is the only company I've worked at. So I graduated in '77 out of with my master's and went to Harris. Two reasons I went there. It was minus 60 degrees at Lafayette that year. I went down at spring break to interview at Harris, and it was 70-some degrees, and they gave me an offer, and I took it. That's one story I tell. The other is they were working on a space shuttle, and they offered me work on the shuttle, and I wanted to be part of that mission, so I really wanted to do the work. And that's the real reason I went to Harris. It really was from minus 56, it really was 70 degrees, but it was the shuttle work I wanted to work on. I'm a math undergrad, I'm a computer science master's. I got my math degree and went looking for a job, and at that point realized that math degree and getting a job didn't go together well. And I'd always had a passion for computer science. My father was one of the pioneers in computer science. He was on the original ANSI team, for those that are familiar with the definition of the definition of the bytes that you use to represent letters on a computer is ANSI. My dad was on the committee that designed that. So he had me interested in computer science, and I thought I could get that through a math degree, and then realized it didn't work. So I went back and got my master's in computer science. At Harris, I came in as an engineer. I expected to be an engineer doing software for my career. About 7 years into that, I started down the path of, I really don't like being managed by some of these managers I have. I think I can do a better job, and I started moving more into management. So, a lot of what I had to learn about being a manager, I had to learn on the job, or I had to learn through training opportunities I had at Harris. So I mentioned I did the mini MBA, which was a fantastic learning experience to work with the university and take 5 of the MBA classes and learn a lot more about the business side than just the engineering side that I had. The comments I got back when I returned from this 3-month mini MBA were, you're a changed man. You're thinking different. You're thinking business case instead of if then else. Yeah, I know. I was thinking of Fortran at that time. So a lot of the business models that I needed, or a lot of the management models, that I needed, I didn't know, and I had to learn as I went. So I became an engineering manager when I was about 31. So I was 7 years at the company, and all of a sudden I'm managing this group of about 36 people. Some of them are younger than me, and that I understood, and some of them were 50, 60 years old. And I had worked before managing people, and most of the jobs I had were growing up were working in a nursery, that's plant nursery, working at college in the cafeteria, and I was head waiter in the cafeteria. But I was working with people where you're pretty directive in the mode that you use to manage. So do this, it should take this long, do this, as opposed to the delegating, which is go do that, and I'll leave you alone. Most of what I had experienced was over here. And all of a sudden, when I'm learning, I'm working with these senior people, and you walk into the office to talk to them, and a lot of the comment you get back is, why are you here? So you had to learn that there's a management style which is directed. And one of the ways we talk about that is, so the new hires that we bring in, very directive style needed. First day is, did you find your parking place? Right. Second, did you find your office? Right. Next, you're going to need the restroom. Right. And maybe the coffee machine, and probably the other order. But very directive. Here's what I want you to do. Here's when I want you to do it. And then there's other styles. And you go into coaching, go into supporting, and then with your senior people, how you delegate. Say, here's what I need you to do. Here's the general guidelines. It's all yours. Come talk to me if you need help. And I'll check in on you later. And that model, it just plays out. We were talking. Bill and I were talking on the way up here. We had a discussion last week, this week, We're doing a pilot at work looking at lost time. So we're asking our engineers, tell us what you plan to do for the next 2 weeks, and then I want you to write down for every hour or whatever you do, what did you do, and was that what you planned to do? And if it wasn't what you planned to do, then is that lost time? Meaning you're doing something that either is not required for the program, or wasn't what you thought you were going to get done in that time, but it's around that methodology. We went into that, we've done that before with our manufacturing group. So when you have repetitive tasks and you're looking at lost time, it kind of registers with us as making sense. But when we were talking about engineering and innovation and the kind of things you do in the engineering world, we weren't sure it made sense. Bill was sure it made sense, I wasn't sure it made sense. So we did this pilot to try it out. And it was an interesting result, because at the end of the day, the team, one, said, thank you for picking us to do this, because we really learned a lot about ourselves, and we're making changes in the way we operate that can make us a lot more efficient. The other thing they found was about 35% of their time was categorized as lost time. And that kind of blew everybody away. We didn't expect that. One of the recommendations that came out of that exercise is we need to be more specific in our management on telling people how long we expect tasks to take. And we were talking this morning, I said, for the directing style, where here's what I need you to do, here's how long it should take, that makes a lot of sense. For people who are over here into delegating your more senior people, if I go into one of my high band people, my 20-year experienced person, and say, I think this task should take you 3 hours, he'd say, thank you, young man, you can go now. And I know how to do this, and I'll get it done, I'm a professional, I'll get it done, I'm supposed to. So even that kind of discussion, we have to remember that when you roll that out, it's here's a standard work and here's what you expect, you've got to roll that out different depending on who you're rolling it out to. And the other thing about this model is you have to remember it's very task specific. So I may have a senior level person that is very good at mechanical design, but I'm going to go ask him to do something totally different than what he's used to in business development. And even though in mechanical design he's here, in business development he just went back over there, and then he has to work back through that model. Any questions on that? Comments? Sounds good. Okay. So the other model that you really have to understand is a change management model. And we go through change a lot. We reorganize a lot, we change a lot, and we have management that believes if you're not changing, you're not advancing, but you have to understand the model. So I have a change I want to do, and I think it's going to change my productivity to the better. And so, boom, I put it in place. If I don't expect my productivity to go down before I expect it to go up, I'm going to be very disappointed. Because it takes a while for people to get used to, I'm doing things differently, you're going to have a lot of, but that's the way I've always done it, and we tried this before, it's not going to work. And then you have to go through all that and get back to this curve on the way back up. So one of the things one of the things we're talking about today is we are building a new building. We're used to buildings that are one floor, maybe two, no windows, offices, doors. An engineer comes in, goes in their office, can close the door and be alone. We are building a new building with open collaborative space in mind. So there will be cubes. We don't use that word, we call them collaborative spaces. Cubes to turn people off immediately. But it's going to be a change. So in our office space, you can collect stuff. And people who have been there for 30 years have a lot of stuff. And when you move them around, all that stuff has to move around with them. In the new building, they'll have not that much room to put their stuff, and the rest of the stuff, if they have it, will go somewhere else in the building. So a change will be you can't carry all those books, those textbooks from college that you never use anyway. They can't go to your new building. You won't be able to close the door and have that private conversation in your work area. And the reason we're building this building is, to raise our productivity, raise collaboration, have a better working environment. But I guarantee you, the day we open that building, if we don't prepare correctly, we're gonna go down here big time before we come back up here. And we're working with a lot of other companies that have gone through the same transition, and every one of them tell you, you're coming down here first. Don't expect to get that productivity day one. But once the population gets used to that collaborative workspace, you'll fly up. But again, you have to understand that model. So the other, I know Florida went through an exercise of looking at combining the CIS and the ECE. And I'll give you a different example. Purdue University went through an exercise of looking at combining computer science and ECE. And when the chair of the computer science department said, here's what I'm going to go do, he didn't think through this at all. And he didn't think at all about how far down that path that was going to go. And so far down that it never turned around that corner to go back up. So again, you have to really think through change and change management. When I was, let's see, I was an engineering manager from 1985 to about 1992. And in 92, I became a director. And my boss sat me down and said, good news and bad news, you're a director, your job is in Orlando. And I live in Palm Bay. So that's about an hour drive each way to where they wanted me to do work. One of the things, if you haven't read Jim Collins' Good to Great, it's get the right people on the bus, and if the wrong people are on the bus, you might need them to get off the bus. But it's saying get the right people in the organization. That was a great learning experience for me going over to Orlando. One, I didn't know the people over there at all when I got assigned there. I didn't know the business they were in. I didn't know their customers. It was great learning for me. It was, when you talk about you want to step out of your comfort zone, you want to get into something new and change, man, that was it across the board. I knew one other person in that business area, and he's our current president. Where this lesson hit me, we were working a large proposal for the UK, and it had a large software component to it. And I knew the software engineers back in Palm Bay, and I wanted to bring one of my leaders over and say, I want you to lead this task, but the group in Orlando said, oh, you can't do that. That will hurt the feelings of people here. We've got good people here too. Go ahead and use the local people. And I listened, and I learned a big lesson, because we underbid that software, and when we executed it, we over-executed it, and we had a huge problem. And I'm convinced if I had had the right team in day one to bid and execute that program, that would have been very successful. But it was a lesson to me of, if you know the right people, get the right people in the right jobs, and they'll get the job done correctly. You mentioned vision in the introduction. The example I used for vision, when we were in Orlando, it was a business it was a 2,000 person business up in Syosset, New York, and we started losing contracts over the time up in New York, and it ended up being down to 100 people, and they shut down Syosset and moved that operation down to Orlando. And when I got moved over there, the debate was, do we keep Orlando open, or do we shut it down and move what's left over to Palm Bay? The people in Orlando wanted to be in Orlando. They moved from New York, owned houses in Orlando, wanted to stay in Orlando. It was about June time frame, and the lease on our building was up in November. So we had from June to November to convince the division to renew that lease and keep us in Orlando. So we all wore badges that said renew the lease, and everybody in the legend lives on, renew the lease was the badge. And everybody in that building knew exactly what that meant. You've got to turn this business around and make this a viable business. So management in Palm Bay understands that they should renew that lease and give all these couple hundred people jobs near where they live. Now, it didn't work out. We shut it down and moved. It was a great vision, and it worked out pretty well. It did work out fairly well for us. Victim accountability model. So understanding that you've got upsiders and downsiders, and people that take adversity and say, I'm going to make good out of it, and people that take adversity and go, woe is me, and life is terrible. I mentioned I got promoted to director in '92. In 1994, we not a real good year for aerospace companies, and we had to restructure our management scheme, and I was a director and I became a manager again. And I could have very easily gone down this, oh, woe is me, what are you doing to me, right? Or I could take that job and say, well, I made director before, I'll do it again, and take what I have and go make the best of it, which is obviously what I did. So I became a manager, went in day one saying, all right, I'm here for the long haul, let's have one-on-ones with everybody in the department again, and re-energize where I was, and showed my boss, hey, I'm still in this to stay, and I'm here when you need me. About a year later, he pulled me out of that and gave me a different assignment. I was able to grow back into the position I'm in today. I love the what are you doing to create, promote, or allow? So if you look at a situation, what are you doing to either create, promote, or allow that situation? We had a discussion about employees in the division, and some employee, we look at performance of the employees, and not all employees perform at the level. And there's some that are just kind of getting through on a day-to-day basis. And we were talking about, so management team, what are you doing to create, promote, or allow that group of people to stay where they are? So when they look around, are they getting, I'm happy to be here, or things are happy, or things are good, or are they getting the feedback that, you could be doing more and getting pushed? So the last part I want to talk about is this, what do they call these? Rotos? What is it called? This is the stuff that I like talking about, that is all the things they tried to teach me when I was in college, in that psych class that it was at 7:30 on Saturday morning, that I really wasn't interested in at the time. But as you go through your management career, you realize, that there was some stuff there I wish I had known earlier. So the Myers-Briggs and the personality profiles and left and right brain. So I'd like to go through some of it. Let me start with the generation. So this is the profile of my workforce and 3,400 engineers at Harris. And this is the how many do I have, and this is the age of the and so you can see I've got this big group of engineers that in this baby boomer range, or in this 55-year-old range, and that wave has been moving this way for the last 10, 15 years. So one thing is we're worried about that wave. Once you're 55, 10 years at the company, you're retirement eligible. You'd have to go look at your 401ks and the stock markets to see if you're really eligible at home to retire. But, this wave is moving towards retirement. This wave decided, or it's not this wave, but this group of it, called the matures, have decided, I like working better than not working, and they just don't go away. there's some great people in that group, so we're glad we don't go away. But from a manager, we need to understand, what does it take to manage this group? What does it take to manage the baby boomers? What does it take for the Gen X? And then millennials, Gen Ys. And now your group, maybe not your group, are you less than 18 still? You're all over 18. So there's another group called Gen Z, which are pretty much 0 to 18 years of age. It's the new generation. This generation is named because there's always been an internet in their life. They don't know life without internet, and they don't know life without smartphones. But the expectations of this group versus this group are different. Maybe not as much there, but certainly over here. So the expectations of how fast can you advance, what kind of work, what kind of responsibility you're given, we're different. Now, we did do some surveys a couple years ago on millennials to see, so we're reading things in books and we're seeing things on TV about you. Are those things that we're hearing really represent the cross-section of millennials that go to good engineering schools, get engineering degrees, and go work in an engineering company? Because when we ask the question like, so you're used to getting things handed to you on a platter, it really offended them all, right? Which is what you read in the book. Or you have to have a trophy for everything you did, which also offended them. So we wanted to understand, what is it that drives you? Do you want internet cafes at work? One of the things we were told that we got to set up so they can do their networking while they're at work. And the response was, no, thank you, I do that after work. I really don't need any help from you. So it was interesting sort of, but I have to be careful not to just discard everything you know about millennials and make sure that we treat you like you want to be treated when you're in the work. The other thing I found I always like to talk about is we did a exercise up at Purdue, and they had all of our the corporate partners sitting in a group, and they had the students sitting in a group, and they asked us questions to answer about our generation. And one of the things the students came back and said is, well, we don't plan to stay at our first job more than 2 years, and that's why we're different than the baby boomers. And if you looked at the corporate group, when we did our exercise, we had all in that group been at our company at least 25 years ago. And a lot of us, that was our first job and we were still there. And they were looking at us saying, well, we're not the same as you, we're not going to do that. But every one of us in the baby boomer group said when we left college, we expected to go to our first job for 1 or 2 years. My wife did not unpack our boxes from Indiana for 2 years. Because I had told her, we will be in Florida for 2 years and we'll probably go somewhere else. And 2 years and 1 day, she started unpacking. So is that a difference in the generations, or is that just a difference in maturity or expectation? Or has that changed at all? And do the people writing about the millennials forget about what they were like when they were that same age? So diversity and inclusion, we do a lot of work at Harris on making sure that, I talked about generations, but there's also the ethnic backgrounds, the minorities. We want to make sure that we have a workforce at Harris that is diverse and that it is inclusive. So what I mean by inclusive, I want to make sure that I don't have any subconscious things that I do that keeps you from being a valuable part of my workforce. So I need to understand that you might be different than what I am, and you might be different than the people. Sorry. and that's what we have to. That's what we have to avoid. Is, well, you look different. You don't look like me. You don't talk like me. Well, you may grow up in a different culture, and you may just think a little different than I do. You may have different value systems, and I need to make sure I can work that into the way I manage the company and get the most out of you, independent of the way you have that value system. And as a matter of fact, we strive hard to get a diverse population. And diverse means male, female. Diverse means African American, Hispanic, Asian, Caucasian. It also means I don't want all my graduates as good as you are from Florida. I'd like to have some people that grew up in the Midwest, some people that grew up in the Northeast, some people, because they've learned to solve problems differently. They have a different environment around them, and I need them to come in and work with the different groups to say, I have a different way of solving that problem than maybe you do. We do the same thing if I take an RF engineer and a photonics engineer, and if I ask the photonics engineer to solve this problem, they're going to solve it the way they're used to solving those problems. If I take an RF engineer and say, why don't you look at it, they'll have a whole different perspective on it. It's the same concept of diversity and inclusion. Personality types, I'll skip that. So I'd like to talk about left brain, right brain. We talked about Myers-Briggs. And why do I do that? Because you need to understand how to work in groups and how to understand why people in the group don't think like you do. And why they don't evaluate things the same way you do. Why they can't see your way of doing things. So have people seen left brain, right brain? Do you know if you're a left brain or right brain? No? So I'm going to take you through a quick test. So you'll know at the end of the test if you are left brain or right brain. So what I'd like you to do is find an object. Take that. And put your finger so that you are pointing to that object. Right. And then close one eye and put it on the object, and then open the other, and then switch eyes. The eye that is stronger, the finger will not move. The eye that is the weaker, the finger will move off of the object, and you'll see that. The other way to do that is form a block like that, that does that covers that, and you can do the same thing by, square it on that thing until with both eyes open, then open, close one eye. With one eye, you will still be in the middle. The other eye, you probably won't even see it. Right? So if it's your left eye that is your dominant, the object doesn't move, you're probably right brain. If it's your right eye that it doesn't move, you're probably left brain. So they swap. If you don't like that one, take your hands like that and just fold your thumbs over each other. Which thumb is on top? You can do both, but which one naturally is on top? So when I do it, my right hand, if I try to do my left hand on top, it feels awkward. My right hand is always on top. Cross your legs. Which one naturally do you put on top? And I know you switch back and forth, but if you put your right leg on top, it's an indication of what. Do this. Which hand is out? Yeah, if I try to do that with my right hand is out when I do this. If I try to do it the other way, I have to really think about it. And again, it's right hand is left brain indication. So when you did that and you kept track of how many left and rights, were it mostly dominated one direction? And no, you went back and forth. So you're half and half, that's fine, because a lot of people don't have a dominant brain. They use a lot of the dominant side. So typically, left brain is more the analytical brain, and right brain is more the artistic brain. Now, there's some other things about the brain. If you notice when I did my honor flight talk, there were times in there that I had to stop and collect myself and not get emotional. One of the things I can do is, since emotion is on the right side, and you can move yourself back to the left side, which is not as emotional. And how do I do that? I do math. So I'll do 2, 4, 8, 6, whatever. Pick something, do squares, do cubes, and you can move your brain back over to the left side, get out of the emotion, and take yourself out of the emotional moment you're in. The other thing you can do is just start talking more. Because as you talk more, you move your brain you move your activity to the back of the brain, which is also away from the emotional side of the brain. So there's just two tricks I use and unfortunately, I get a lot of opportunities to get up and try to do the honor flight thing or some other things for the kids, and I have to use that math trick a lot. So the other, my neighbor and I do a lot of building projects together. And he's right-brained, I'm left-brained. And my wife always loves watching us because we look at problems differently. I've got a board in my hand, it's going there, it's got to do this to get there. Ken's got the same board in his hand, it's going there, and he's got to do this to get there. And we're saying the same minutes. No, it's got to do this. Well, he's thinking over there, and I'm thinking over there. And again, why do I say that? When you're in groups, in my staff, I have a couple of right-brain people. It's really hard to find right-brain engineers. Engineers tend to be left-brain. And so I try to find managers that are right-brain to make sure I have somebody on my staff that is thinking on that other side. It's out of the box. But when they come up with their ideas, it's really obvious to everybody else that was a right-brained idea. Because we're all going, huh? I don't know the equation for what you just said. And then you have to understand, and then we all say, oh yeah, that's Steve, we understand that. So this is just kind of interesting. If you look at this silhouette, is she rotating clockwise or counterclockwise to you? Anybody, is she rotating? Anybody see her rotating counterclockwise? So if you're rotating clockwise, which a lot of you said, the myth is, or the story is, that you tend to be left-brained. If it's rotating counterclockwise, you're more right-brained. So the question is, when you did your tests does the rotation of this correlate to what brain you thought you were from the test? So if you thought you were right brain by doing the tests I gave you, is that rotating counterclockwise? No? So half of the sites, if you go on the web and look this up, half the sites say this is a good indication of left-right, half say it's a great optical illusion, and do what you want with it. I tried this out. I've got my admin is right brain. I asked her to come in and look at this, and it was rotating counterclockwise. And I said, do squares for me. And she started going through that and got about 5 of them, and she said, look, it switched. I got a manager that came in, one of my right brain managers, and did the same thing, but I did cubes with him. And he got quite a ways in, and it switched. So, is that is it an indication? I don't know. It's interesting that that math problem made that turn. Now it turns out I can make this thing go. I can make it go counterclockwise, clockwise, every rotation just by telling my brain which leg is in front of the other as it turns. So a lot of times with this, you can make it turn one way or the other. So Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs looks at these groups. Is that 8? 8? What? 5 plus 5, 10. Looks at these characteristics of human behavior and makes kind of conclusions about which one of these blocks you fit in, and based on where you fit, you have tendencies to be this kind of personality. So let me talk about the couple of them. So sensing and thinking, sensing and intuition. Somebody tell me what this is. That's a good sensing. What else? Anybody else tell me what this is? Pardon? It's red. That's also sensing. Pardon? Fruit. That's starting to get a little more intuitive. Pardon? Somebody said something. I'm sorry?
It's a solid object.
Solid object, yeah. So, does anybody think apple pie? Does anybody think grandma? Mom's breakup? So it's the sensing what that is, and then the other side is, well, that reminds me of something else. Right? And that it's the in-box, out-of-box kind of thinking. So thank you for the prop. That'll become dinner on the way home too. So here's a situation. You've got an all-star team, and you're a group of kids that you want to take on a trip, an all-star team, and you have a limited amount of money, so you can only take a certain set of the teams. This group has worked equally as hard to get on this team, but you can only take a certain set of them. Who do you take? Anybody? The group that works best with each other. Okay, that's kind of a feeling kind of answer. That's good. Yeah.
The ones that have different perspectives.
Okay.
The ones that will get the most out of it.
Okay. And this is actually what you would do. Or you just make up an answer you think I'll like.
What type of competition are we going into that, right? It's a sport competition, like a quiz thing, is it,
We'll say it's sports.
They're all good.
You take the All-Stars.
And that's what I expected. When I ask people, take the best player, right? It's basketball, take the tallest ones, depending on the sport. And so that's the kind of the thinking side, right? Is well, just take the best player. The feeling side might say one is, well, why can't I raise more money? Who would get the most out of it? Well, they practice harder than they deserve it, right? And so it's kind of the thinking, feeling part of this. Skip through some of these. Some of these characteristics. I'm an INTP, and I love data. You cannot give me too much data to analyze, and I love our new president says, I want fact-based, data-driven decisions. I love it. Other people say, I don't need data. I can figure that out by gut. There's a lot of debates at work about metrics and program metrics and keeping track of. So I'm doing software, and what metrics do I need to write the software and manage the software? And INTP says, bring them on. I love it. Give me more metrics so I can manage that team. Other sets would say, I don't need it. By gut feel, I know I'm doing well or not well. I can manage without it. And so we have to worry about how do I have the right things at work, the right processes in place that I can deal with those that need data and want data to analyze, and yet have processes, procedures for those that don't need that data. I mean, again, it's interesting. Our new CEO, Bill Brown, loves data, and it kind of goes through the organization to bring data, and that's really foreign to those who are used to managing without that data that he wants to see. He wants to see data in very specific ways, and I guarantee you, once he sets that requirement, we're really good at doing that. But it may or may not be useful for somebody else who doesn't manage in the same way that he does. I love it in debates. If you listen to the presidential debates and watch that, you spend an hour watching the two gentlemen debate, and then another hour of the people telling you what you just heard. And it's like, wait a minute, I was there, I heard it. But no, you have to listen to somebody else. And also, being a data person, the one thing that got me during debates is I'm watching Romney, and he's talking about numbers of this or numbers of that. And it's like, just show the chart. Everybody in the U.S. will just understand it if you just show the chart, and they don't do that because they understand that there's a small number of us over in this INTP bracket who would love to just see the data in the charts, but it would mean nothing to the people over here. They don't care. They wouldn't understand it. And so, again, it's interesting to watch that. So I give Bill enough time here. We did an exercise up at Darden at the University of Virginia that I found very interesting. If you look at a couple of these pairs from the Myers-Briggs, sensation, intuition, the thinking, feeling, and then the introvert, extrovert. And again, introvert, extrovert is not, are you outspoken? It's where do you get your energy to recover? So again, I'm an introvert, and driving to Orlando an hour a day was perfect for me. Because in the morning I had an hour by myself to figure out what I wanted to do, and in the evening I had an hour by myself to wind down and get ready to get home and meet the kids and the dog. And other people energized by being with people, that would have drove them nuts, that hour back and forth. So that's what they're talking about, where you get energy. And I put a lot of slides in here about different types, but I want to get down here. So we did an exercise up at Darden where we had probably had 30 managers from Harris and going through a training class, and we took a test and figured out where are you on this in this model. So he takes a couple of the Myers-Briggs and comes up with a different model. And we broke the group up based on where we were in the model in these colors. And being managers, the majority of the people in the room were either blue or red. I think out of 30 of us, there was one sunshine yellow and 2 or 3 greens. And actually, I got that. There was 1 green and 2 or 3 yellows. And I'm going to tell you about the blues and the reds in the discussion because being a blue, I really didn't care about them and what they said about who they were. But what was interesting, actually I'll do it. So what was interesting, we did this exercise and said, all right, tell me about the characteristics of a blue. And blues tend to, if they're in a group and somebody asks a question, they tend to wait. They think about the response, they contemplate, and what we say is you really have to count to about 8 seconds. So if I ask this group a question, I should really count to 8 and make sure that the blues have a chance to actually get the courage up to say what they want to say. The reds will answer before I finish my question. And whether they have anything to say or not, they're going to answer. So and you go through, so blues, we broke up and said blues, what do you think about reds? Reds, what do you think about blues? Well, as a blue, it's like reds never let us get a word in edgewise. We can't get into the conversation. They always have something to say. They're not always value added. Reds, what do you think about blues? They never contribute. I can't get them to say a word. Right? I have to, pound it out of them. They say it. And we all looked at each other in this exercise and said, "That's me." Yeah, you said I'm blue and I'm listening, and that's really me. So that fall, we were doing our normal 360 process and evaluating each other. We do our reviews, so you get 360 inputs. And I asked some of my managers to give inputs on other managers. And I started getting back these comments like, they don't participate in meetings. Or, I can't get rid of that class because they're always out. And it's like, oh my God, you guys are reds and blues and you don't understand it. You haven't figured out how to work. In realization. So we went through the exercise with them where we characterized everybody and had the groups and how to get together, how to work together. So I've got one last slide, the free advice part. As you go through your career, be willing to take a change, get out of your comfort zone. If you're not out of your comfort zone, you're not learning, you're not growing. Be in a continuous learning mode. If you think your learning ends when you graduate from the University of Florida, then you will be a failure in your career. Your learning is just starting. The technology that you're learning here will not be the same technology that you'll use 3 years from now. So be ready to jump at every opportunity. Engineers love to be engineers, but you need to learn the business side. It's fun to do engineering, but if you don't make money at it, if there's no value add to it, if you can't sell it, it's not worth it.
Amen, brother.
Take advantages. I mentioned I had the opportunity to do the Harris U MBA program. It came right when my second daughter was born. So I was off for 3 months and missed her first 3 months of school, but it was an opportunity that I just couldn't miss. Make a difference, differentiate yourself. There's a lot of people just like you. If you're going to differentiate yourself, have it be in a good way. The opposite is not really good. When you present, this is a pet peeve of us, understand you're the presenter, you're the expert, it's your material. And we have a lot of times we have program reviews every month, and somebody will go up and say, I'm filling in for the program manager and I'd love to present his charts. You ask a question and they say, well, I don't know, I'm just filling in. Well, then don't present the charts. And if you're going to present them, you ought to understand everything on there and be able to answer questions. If you don't like getting up in front of groups, force yourself to do it. Practice it. A lot of being an engineer is selling your ideas to others, being able to get up in front of the customer and be the expert in the room. And I'll tell you, we have 3,400 engineers, and at almost every meeting we are in with customers, we are the experts in the room. And if we can present correctly, then they understand that. It is important. You don't have to be a leader to lead. And what I mean by that is you don't have to have a leader title to be a leader. You can be on the program as an individual contributor and lead on that program through leveraging your abilities and through others. And I already talked about that. So Bill, I left you 25 minutes. It's a little more than the 5 years.
A little more than 5. That was,
Thank
I
you
was
for your
expecting you to give me